Hey guys, what's up? Has it already been like 3 months? Guess we should do another weekly show. Let's do it. Welcome to 2020, the land of tomorrow, today. We're gonna talk about movies today. I figured I'd just narrow it down to the top 5 best and the top 5 worst movies that I saw in 2019. Of course, movies that just released in 2019. I saw a lot of movies last year. Kind of a side effect, I guess, of actually working in the movie industry now. Everybody always wants to go see movies for some reason, including me. So I saw a bunch. Some were really good, some were really bad, some were distinctly in the middle, and I won't talk about them because who cares? Let's start with the worst. The 5th worst movie I saw this year was Detective Pikachu. Now, Detective Pikachu is a movie that I overall enjoyed because it had this wonderful sense of adventure and seeing these Pokemon in the real world for the first time. It kind of captured that childlike magic and delivered it back to me. So why is it the 5th worst movie I've seen this year? Because as a movie, it's hot garbage. This movie is such a cookie cutter, safe, play by the numbers, kids movie with every cliche and plot line that they could possibly muster.
Tim, your dad was a legend in this precinct. If you were anything like your dad...
I'm not.
You can tell exactly 100% of the plot within the first 15 minutes of the entire movie. Like, it is not even a little bit subtle. But if you're 5, it's probably gonna blow your freaking brain. But I'm not. I'm 27, so not that great. I did enjoy it, and I think that any longtime hardcore Pokemon fan would also derive a lot of enjoyment from it, but just looking at a movie perspective, it's no Pixar movie, it's no Disney movie, it's like a Nickelodeon movie, which is really probably the meanest thing I could say about it, so let's keep it moving.
You can shove it.
What? I can shove it? Okay, that's it. No, we're switching roles. I'm bad cop, you're good cop.
No, we're not cops.
Bouncing back to the top 5 best movie I've seen, The Irishman. The Irishman came out, released by Martin Scorsese, starring Robert De Niro, and released onto the streaming platform of Netflix, showing an odd but very welcome change in the overall quality and design of the movies that Netflix is apparently going to be going for, focusing more on smaller, easier to tell stories with big name directors and actors instead of making movies like Bright, which was bad. It was real bad. That was actually the worst movie I think I saw of whatever that year was. I don't even remember what year it was, but I guarantee you that was the worst movie I saw that year. For sure. God, that movie was bad. The Irishman is great. It's a long movie. Some people find it very intimidating based on how long it was, although there's certainly longer movies. Movie pushes about 3.5 hours of runtime, maybe like 3:20 if you chop off, the credits, and I didn't mind it at all. I actually sat down totally intending to only watch the movie in bits and pieces that maybe I would get about halfway through tonight and watch the rest of it the next night, and I totally lost track of time and ended up finishing the entire movie. It flew by. The pacing of the movie was excellent. It never felt too slow or boring or like there was really a moment where I wanted to stop, which doesn't mean to say that it was an entirely in-your-face action-packed over-the-top Michael Bay style movie either, because of course it wasn't. It's Martin Scorsese. It just means that the characters felt believable, the world felt believable, and that things were paced out so well that I just never wanted to stop watching. Every great scene of character building and relationship building would fold into the next scene of action and story progression so nicely, so perfectly woven together constantly throughout the movie that there's just no point where you really want to walk away. Now, The Irishman is of course not totally perfect. To me, going back to the length, that while I didn't mind the length in its entirety, I also thought that there's some fat that could have been trimmed out of this movie for sure, yeah. The ending of the movie honestly could have taken place about 30 to 45 minutes earlier. They spent a lot of the time at the end, minor spoilers, addressing his much later life and the effects that his choices in his younger life had on him as an elderly man and what kind of things they cost him. And while it was a great bit of character dissection to get to watch that and think about it, it also could have been done much more quickly. You're really left to sit and stew on it for a while as all the information is presented with you, and then you just kind of sit there viewing what you already were told 20 minutes ago. But again, overall, it wasn't unwelcome, it just was unnecessary, I guess. I still really liked The Irishman.
do you want to know? You want to know if I did it or not?
The fourth worst movie I saw in 2019 was Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel just really didn't do it for me. I gotta say that, you know, I love Spider-Man too, and Spider-Man also barely missed out on being in the top 5 worst movies of this year. I guess we're just gotten to a point where after Marvel has gone out and created Avengers, where they've pushed the envelope, they've killed characters, they've created the greatest villain set up over a decade of time, and now they're like, here's a couple more origin stories for you. Or like in the case of Spider-Man 2, it was like the same movie as Spider-Man 1, but in Europe and not as good or charming. But we're not talking about Spider-Man 2, we're talking about Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel didn't necessarily do anything bad, except feel like a composite, recycled movie made up of other various Marvel movie parts. It had the kick-your-butt 90s nostalgia like the Guardians of the Galaxy has with the 80s, including some what felt like tonally misplaced soundtracks in Captain Marvel. They work in Guardians, they did not work so much in Captain Marvel for me. The plot twist was alright, it was fine. Brie Larson, I think, is a really, really great actress in Room. I don't know so much here, and again, I don't think that's necessarily her fault. I feel like they took a character from the comics that was never really that fleshed out, but then still didn't really flesh her out that much. Captain Marvel's dynamic with Nick Fury just creates this dynamic where you have two seemingly really overpowered characters, both of whom seem to escape all situations unharmed due to their amazing over-the-top skills and luck, which is like both of those together all the time. And I just don't think either of them play well off of each other because of that. There's no foil to the relationship. There's no contrast to make one of them seem better than the others, but also they seem to lack realistic flaws. The movie itself, it's just a lot of recycled stuff. It wasn't necessarily that bad. It was just, I have seen all these Marvel movies before. Brie Larson certainly deserved better. She's an amazing actress. I wish they had given her a role with a little more depth and nuance and challenge, but instead, we had to play it safe because Marvel is back to playing it safe after Phase 3 for some reason. Boo.
Your life began the day it nearly ended. We found you. With no memory, we made you one of us.
But on the flip side, the fourth best movie I saw this year was Knives Out by Rian Johnson. Some people on the internet have a strong, what I could only really refer to as hate boner for Rian Johnson due to his involvement with The Last Jedi and whether or not you know what, that's as much as I'm willing to talk about The Last Jedi because I don't want to get crucified for my opinions on it. Knives Out was a great, fun movie. A very fun Clue-style whodunit filled with twists and turns. Some of you may be able to spot the ending of the movie a little earlier than others, but I was pleasantly surprised with many of the twists. Being a whodunit focused movie, the movie is filled with twists. Nearly every scene, every act is filled with what are supposed to be very, like, mind-shattering twists, and some land better than others, but overall what really propels the movie is the fantastic characters, the fantastic acting, the great writing, the laughs, the heart. It's just a really good movie. You really love to hate all of the rich family members in their own unique, individual, shitty little ways, and it's just a really good time. It's a movie that's almost hard to talk about because I would not be able to talk about any of the plot without spoiling it, and I don't want to spoil anything from it. I'll just say that if you want a movie that's a little bit funny, a little bit suspenseful, and just has a lot of charm, you should definitely go see Knives Out.
Not finished untangling it, not yet.
What is this? CSI KFC?
The third worst movie I saw in 2019 would just have to be Alita Battle Angel. Alita Battle Angel was maybe my fault for not liking it because I really didn't know what I was walking into. I certainly didn't realize it was going to be in some kind of teen romance, Hunger Games, Twilight style movie that it really ended up being. Is that really my fault or is that advertising's fault for selling me what was supposed to be this dark, gritty movie about robots and androids and whether or not an android constitutes a person or a robot with a consciousness constitutes a person, filled with action in this dark, mysterious world with all these grand set pieces, which were all laid waste to in the background of what is one of the most redundant and just plain flat teen romance plots I have ever forced myself to sit through in its entirety. The main actress in this movie did a good job, I think, honestly, considering the material she was working with. It was fine, she did alright. Her counterpart love interest, however, my god, I don't know if this guy is actually like a sentient piece of cardboard brought to life by the Disney magic that brought Pinocchio to life, but holy shit, this guy is bad in this movie. I have never cared so little about any love interest in any movie ever, and I have seen The Room with Tommy Wiseau. I would root for Tommy Wiseau over this flat cardboard acting piece of shit. And it's really a shame, I think, and the greatest source of disappointment about this movie is that all of the background story seems really fascinating. This world that it's set in, this comic world that they've taken from these manga, it all seems very fascinating. I want to know so much more about the world and what happened and like explore the different characters and how this world works, but we just cannot spend more than 2 minutes at a time away from focusing on world's most cliche and flat love interest ever. Which is totally a shame, because all the side characters are much better. The action's not bad, although it's a little weird that this movie was rated PG-13, despite the fact that these androids are being constantly, brutally murdered. Like, heads are chopped off, skulls are crushed, people are chopped limb from limb. And it's okay because they're robots, but the whole point of the movie is that robots are just as good as people if they have a consciousness. So what are you saying, movie? Is it okay or is it not okay to kill androids and robots? I don't know what you want from me, movie.
I'm with her.
The third best movie I saw this year would be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm a bit of a Tarantino fan myself, not anything like crazy as some of you people may be, but I love me a good Tarantino flick, and honestly, I think Tarantino is at his best not when he's blowing up people's heads named Bob, or chopping people up, or having his bloody gunfights, but honestly, when he just has two characters in a car talking. And this movie is a lot of that style of Tarantino. It's a very slow Tarantino movie, long, slow, meandering, and I love that, dude. I could have watched an 8-hour version of this movie that was just Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio sitting in a car, driving around places, talking about their life, and I would have loved it, quite frankly. Now, I know that's not going to be for everybody, and some of you are for sure like, that sounds horrible. Why would anybody want to watch that? And that's totally fair. You know, if you prefer a movie with more action, more explosions, more visual excitement, that's a valid opinion to have. It's just not one that I necessarily have. I think Tarantino's ability to have two characters have realistic conversations about seemingly normal, everyday subject matters while actually having these deeper, subtle meanings underneath is truly why Tarantino is such a great and masterful filmmaker. And, you know, there is that one gratuitous foot shot in this movie that is possibly the worst, most gratuitous foot shot that Tarantino has ever done. So if you're into that, you'll enjoy that. I'm not really into dirty feet myself. A little gross, Tarantino, but you know, not here to kink shame you. Here to praise your movie and kink shame you a little because it's fucking weird.
I love that stuff, you know, with the killing.
A lot of killing.
The second worst movie of 2019 was Pet Sematary. Pet Sematary was possibly one of the most unnecessary, unneeded, unwarranted, and unenjoyable remakes I have ever seen in my life. You know, when they remade it, which is why I am 100% sure they thought it would be a good idea to remake Pet Sematary, they took it and they gave it a personality. They took a book and a story that had never really been done justice in the visual medium through any TV show or movie, and they gave it a unique, Stranger Things, personality, and it really worked super well. It was something that hadn't been done before, and they added a lot to the subject matter. Pet Sematary is exactly the same movie that they've already made, but worse. Pet Sematary is in no rush whatsoever to get any plot done at all, which isn't always a problem, but it is kind of a problem here. I feel like the first 10 minutes of this story has plot, and the last 15 minutes of this movie has plot, and the rest of the movie is just kind of like, I can't even remember what happens. It's just like people talking and being sad, and this weird extraneous plot with the wife's sister who she was mean to because she freaked her out as a kid because she was like physically ill and disabled or something. And it's just like all these things meandering and just kind of happening and not going anywhere, not progressing, not developing, but just doing stuff until the end, when everything hits the fan and the movie ends exactly how you think it would. Now, people who made this movie thought it would be an interesting twist on Pet Sematary to have the other young child die. In the original, it was like the youngest child who died. In this one, it's like the slightly older child who died. It makes no difference, it turns out. It's the same exact movie, whether you make this kid or that kid die. It turns out, you know, when your young children die, it's pretty much all equivalent. You know, your 2-year-old dying is not that much more tragic than your 6-year-old dying. It's just pretty damn tragic no matter what. And overall, this movie was boring, it was slow, the pacing was awful, and the story had no reason to be retold. Wish I hadn't seen it. Dear God, don't watch Pet Sematary. Watch the original Pet Sematary, please.
Sometimes dead is better.
Second best movie of 2019 is somehow another Netflix released movie. Remember when Netflix only had like one good movie? Marriage Story. Marriage Story is one of the most powerfully acted movies I have ever seen in my life. Not even just of 2019, but like one of the strongest performances from a lead actor and actress I have ever had the pleasure of sitting and watching through. Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson in this movie are absolutely next level. This movie has emotionally driven scene after emotionally driven scene. It would make other movies jealous. Other movies would love to have one singular pivotal moment or monologue that this movie just bust out from scene to scene to scene. The story is pretty basic at its core. You just have two people who were in love and maybe even still are in love, but are getting divorced despite that, as life has just kind of pulled them apart, as their seemingly perfect life was maybe not so perfect, and not addressing these things has pulled at the threads and everything has started to unravel. And it's a really, really beautiful but simple story. I really just think that anybody who's a fan of strong character-driven pieces will really, really love Marriage Story like I did. And if nothing else, it's free, it's on Netflix, you have literally nothing to lose. Although I would warn you, if you watch this with your significant other, you both may end up crying a lot. It's just kind of a small-scale tragedy in its own right, and I thought it was really special.
Not as simple as not being in love anymore.
Eventually, it'll be the two of you having to figure this out. Together.
Number one worst movie I saw this year. I saw Cats. Oh, I saw Cats in theaters. I did it. I went and I paid money to a computer. Really, it wasn't a person. Bought a ticket. Handed the ticket to a guy. He was like, "You're gonna go see Cats?" And I'm like, "Yep, I'm gonna go see Cats." And then he pointed me to a theater where Cats was playing, and then I walked into that theater, and then Cats started playing on the screen, and I stayed all the way until the credits rolled. And I regret all of it. It's been weeks. I'm haunted by the memory of Jellicle Cats. By nude cats spread eagle in front of me with weird genitalless crotch cat naked. It's just so bad. It's just so bad. Cats gets a 1 out of 10. It's the worst movie I've ever seen in my entire life. The best movie I saw of 2019, the opposite of Cats, if you would, was Jojo Rabbit. Proving that rabbits are superior to cats, I guess. Jojo Rabbit is from Taika Waititi, my pretty much favorite director. I'll be honest, I was probably a little biased going into this movie. It also stars some wonderful child actors, and surprisingly enough, Scarlett Johansson also in this movie, also amazing. Scarlett Johansson should be running for Oscars against herself this year, because man, she just acted the hell out of this year. Jojo Rabbit is this beautiful little movie mixed with humor and serious moments and love and family and all these great ideals set in Nazi Germany about a Hitler youth right near the end of the war, right before Hitler kills himself. That's when our movie takes place. You got this totally indoctrinated young kid, and I like to just describe it as Calvin and Hobbes, except Calvin is a Nazi youth and Hobbes is his imaginary friend Hitler. Yeah, but the movie progresses. It's this beautiful story about not accepting who you are because that society says you should be, but becoming a better person because it's your moral obligation as a person, and that your circumstances, your environment, and even your past don't necessarily define you into being a bad person. No matter who you are or what you've done, you can always grow and change and become a better person. And that beautiful, wonderful little message is wrapped up in this amazing, heartfelt package with Sam Rockwell and Scarlett Johansson and some of the best child acting you've seen since Stranger Things Season 1 release. And overall, I just don't want to spoil anything specific, but I'll just say go watch Jojo Rabbit. It is a movie that has just the most heart you could pack into a film. And I really hope it wins some awards, but if not, I'll know that at least it got the Wigwam Award for Best Movie of 2019, which is really the most coveted award in movie making. Sorry, other movies, you suck.
What am I going to do?
No idea.
Got it! I will
Burn
negotiate.
down the house and blame Winston Churchill. Or negotiate.
So hey, those were my favorite movies of the year. There were a bunch of movies I wanted to see that I didn't get to see still as well. Honey Boy, Uncut Gems, Ford vs. Ferrari, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I tried to see as many movies as I could, but in December and November, there was like 2 movies a week releasing. I was working a bunch, so some fell through the cracks. I may do an update video once I finish my list of movies I want to see and see if it's changed anything, or if those movies fall a little more in the middle anyways. Let me know your favorite and least favorite movies that you saw in 2019, and maybe even what you're looking forward to in 2020. And as always, I love your beautiful faces, and I'll catch you guys in another 6 months on our next weekly episode of Weekly What's Up with Wigwam. Peace out, love you, bye-bye.